Hey, everybody. It is Trags Mike Petraglia back with the latest installment of the Jungle Roar podcast, along with Richard Skinner of Local 12 and local12.com. All right, Skinny, it was a sleeper of a Super Bowl, if you ask me, but a dominant one for the Seattle Seahawks. They take home their second Vince Lombardi trophy, exercise some revenge, if you will, for the crushing 28-24 loss back in Super Bowl 49. They beat the Patriots by a score of 29-13 out in the Bay Area on Sunday afternoon. One of the single most dominant defensive performances in Super Bowl history, if not the most dominant defensive performance, certainly right up there with the Chicago Bears, ironically hammering the New England Patriots back in Super Bowl 20. That's what kept going through my mind. You had one team on the field in the Seattle Seahawks that looked prepared to play to its strength, which is its defense, and another in the New England Patriots with a quarterback there for the first time, both quarterbacks there for the first time, but in second-year quarterback Drake May, he looked overwhelmed and overmatched, perhaps injured by his with his shoulder going into the game, but he looked totally overmatched. The better team won.
He looked like Jared Goff did the year that Jared Goff and the Rams lost to the Patriots. Totally overwhelmed, to your point. This Seattle defense, Mike, I think they went 14-1 to finish the season. And that defense, they wound up giving over 300 yards last night, but it never felt like that. I think New England had less than 100 yards going into the fourth quarter. I think 84 to be exact. In the stretch of 15 games in which they finished 14-1, only 4 teams went over the 300-yard mark on them. New England last night, and they did a lot of it in garbage time. The Rams twice. And Arizona barely got over it another time. That shows you how dominant that defense was for such a long stretch. And credit John Schneider, the GM, we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but how he has flipped this roster in 2 years to build that championship team back up, rolling the dice and trading a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Russell Wilson, kind of your face of your franchise, and then have it 2 years later wind up being a Super Bowl champion. Kudos to him for what he built.
Well, it takes some risk. It takes some foresight to go ahead and do what John Schneider did. But that's the kind of dynamic leadership you need. We talked about it the last couple of years with Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles. He is certainly super aggressive, not afraid to turn over a roster, not afraid and go spend to the cap and perhaps beyond, and then worry about the ramifications a little bit down the line if it gives his team in a particular window the best chance to win, which brings us to the Bengals. Obviously, the Bengal fans would like to see, obviously, Duke Tobin, Troy and Katie Blackburn and Mike Brown go out and do that. When I watch a team like Seattle, I wonder if the Bengals have it in their DNA to turn over the roster or go out and address free agency aggressively like they need to.
They did it in 2021, and it turned out to be a Super Bowl team, right? So they have done it, and it can be done, and they need to do it again. But it's not just that. It's the risk of, and I'm not here to tell you to trade Joe Burrow by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the risk of trading your franchise quarterback. And granted, he was older and showing some signs of wear and tear and all of those things. But then trading your best weapon in theory. I know you had JSN on the roster already, but they traded DK Metcalf, and one of the picks they got back turned out to be Nick Emenwari, the rookie safety, who was outstanding last night. They've drafted smartly Devin Weatherspoon, Byron Murphy. They've just done such a good job of building that roster, and they've done it with some risk, as you pointed out. Willing to make a trade, willing to trade a star player for draft capital, willing to trade your franchise quarterback. Again, I'm not going there with Joe Burrow, mind you, but I'm just saying the risks he took. Getting a defensive-minded coach in a day and age when most teams are looking for that new hot offensive play caller, he decided, nope, I'm going to flip the script on this. I'm going to hire a defensive coordinator from Baltimore, Mike McDonald, who's a defensive-minded coach. I read somewhere this morning, and it's a good point. I mean, it feels like he zags when everybody else zigs. Or he zigs when everybody else zags, however you want to put it. That's a great GM, and it is a big difference between what we have in Cincinnati and what Seattle has.
I watched that game last night, and I kept thinking to myself, not only did it look like Drake May was in over his head, but a more dynamic offense, which the Rams certainly were, which the Bengals, I think, are, all of their failings of this year aside. When the Bengals are at their best, they show that they are still one of the most dynamic offenses in the National Football League. A team like the Bengals give the Seattle Seahawks a much better game offensively and challenge the upper end of that defense or the back end of that defense more than I think Drake May and the Patriots could.
Well, and it's also two quarterbacks. Drake May's not in that upper echelon tier yet. He might get there sooner rather than later. He had a fantastic year. Obviously, he was in the conversation for most valuable player, and rightfully so. But you also have a Joe Burrow who's seen and done a lot. You have Matthew Stafford who's seen and done even more. So I think that's part of what that's why the Rams, again, in the last 15 games, only 4 times has a team gone over 300 yards against this Seattle defense. 2 of them are the Rams. So, that just tells you right there that Matthew Stafford and a dynamic offense can give Seattle trouble, but there's just not a lot of those offenses around.
Right, and obviously the Bengals couldn't get out of their own way defensively, and that's why. Let's not sugarcoat this.
Well, one more thing too, Mike. And as much as we're going to point to Seattle's offense, and rightfully so, or Seattle's defense, their offense averaged 32 points per game in the playoffs. Their lowest point total in their 3 playoff games, or postseason games, if you will, came last night when they scored 29 points. They show they can do it running the ball. They show they can do it with the screen game. They show they can do it down the field with JSN. Sometimes Sam Darnold's evil twin shows up and he makes a lot of mistakes, but at times he looks as good as any quarterback in the NFL. So I don't want to get their offense discounted either, because it was an offense that had great success during the season. Look, the defense was the story. There's no question, because if you just put on the film and turn off all the sound and just watch, they popped off the film, especially for 3 quarters. And as I mentioned, during that 15-game stretch. But that offense, it's not dynamic, but it's really darn good.
Well, how about this? They lose their best weapon in Jackson Smith and Jigba,
right,
pretty much for the entire game, and they still put up 22 points.
22 points, yeah.
Because one was a pick 6. But all of that being said, they were able to dominate the game with a complementary style that was running the football with Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker, who should have had a touchdown. It's a terrible hold, but it was a hold. So that TD late in the game for Kenneth Walker came back. But they were able to use Kenneth Walker effectively, I thought, and they, for the most part, kept Sam Darnold out of trouble. There were 2 to 3 plays in that game where the Patriots could have made an interception or picked off the ball, where Darnold made just not good decisions, and they couldn't capitalize. And to me, that's why the Seattle Seahawks were able to win the game, that and the dominant defense.
You used the word, it was used by Zach Taylor a lot this year. It's complementary football. Throw in their special teams too, because the field goals added up over time in that football game. You had to have those as well. That was a true championship team. They maybe didn't feel like it all year because, they didn't make the playoffs last year. They did go 10-7, but started off slowly this year. They were 3-2 at one point, and they just, I guess because they play out west, we don't see them a ton, right? But they just kept building week after week after week. And when you look back on this season, they were the best team from regular season through the playoffs, and that doesn't always happen that way.
All right, I want to move on to some Bengal-centric news, Skinny.
Yep.
Speaking with Richard Skinner of Local 12 and Local12.com here on the post-Super Bowl 60 edition of the Jungle Roar podcast, brought to you by Prize Picks. Judy Battista of the NFL Network had a kind of a notes report on Sunday before the Super Bowl. One of her tidbits, Bengals could franchise tag Trey Hendrickson. Why is that interesting and important? Well, I think it really is one of the first dominoes that has to fall for the Bengals to plan their offseason, how much they're going to spend in free agency. Do they want to commit that $30 million franchise tag to Trey Hendrickson? Do they want to tag and trade him and get maybe a draft pick, let's say a 4th rounder for him heading into the draft, which is crucial this year? There are a lot of different ways that the Bengals could go. I think it would make a lot of sense for the Bengals to tag and trade him. Nope. Why not?
Here's why. You're going to expose yourself to the liability of $30 million. Who's going to take on that contract? He won't get any more than $20 million average value on the free agent market. I think he'll be lucky to crack $20 million. Who in the hell is going to overpay for a 32-year-old defensive end coming off surgery? Nobody. That's who. And so if you expose yourself to the $30 million liability, I just can't imagine a team takes that on. I just can't.
Well, but if you do, you have a cost certainty built in, knowing you have one of you. Now,
Ugh,
you only
ugh.
do that. You only do that, Skinny, if you still think Trey Hendrickson can play, maybe not even at a 17 and a half sack a year level, but let's say 10 sacks a year. You're going to need production at that level. And Trey Hendrickson, the risk
What I know
becomes,
what I know is he's coming off surgery and he's 32 years old.
he's coming off surgery, correct. So
I'm not exposing myself to that liability. No. If
so
they do
you
that,
just don't touch him and let him go.
Because I don't see any team willing to pay that value in the tag and trade scenario. Listen, if I were to tag him, the best option is to trade him. I will fully agree with you on that part.
Right.
But I'm not going to expose myself to the $30 million liability.
So you don't see there being a market for Trey Hendrickson?
I just not at $30 million. I don't. I just don't see that being. I just can't imagine a team would be that stupid to expose themselves to that kind of money for a guy coming off of surgery who really wasn't even very good in the 7 games he played last year. Despite the surgery.
So let me throw you out this scenario. There's a team out there that's willing to spend that $30 million for 1 year, take a flyer on Trey Hendrickson. A team that's close, perhaps, that needs an extra edge rusher, and Trey Hendrickson could fit that bill. And for that team, that $30 million is not as big of an expense. And I understand that. But there is a team out there desperate, figuring, look, go out, take this chance on Trey Hendrickson. If he works, he's our key to going deep in the playoffs with a defense that's on. I can't even think of a team right now, but a team with some Baltimore, for instance. I mean, I don't know. I could see a scenario where a team takes a 1-year flyer on Trey Hendrickson. Now,
at $15 million.
The issue with Trey Hendrickson is in the division, nobody's going to want to give the Bengals a draft pick back.
Well, again, if I'm going to tag him with the idea of trading him, I better find my trade partner right now, today, before I wind up tagging him. I'm not going to tag him and then go, okay, now we're open for business.
Right.
No, you better
fair.
have that buttoned up by the time you decide to tag him and trade him.
So, if you are Duke Tobin and you are Katie Blackburn, what are you doing with Trey Hendrickson?
Bye-bye. Just letting him go. You will get a compensatory pick back, although that compensatory pick will be wiped out because you're going to be active in free agency, so it'll probably be a moot point. I'm just letting him go. Listen, he had great success here. You didn't obviously plan on him for more than this year, unless you were planning to tag him when you made the deal you made for 2025. It felt like a 1 year. Let's all ride off in the sunset together. Let's hopefully take this to the postseason and go as deep as we can. And we have our pass rusher, and it didn't work out that way. And I'm not going to expose myself to $30 million for a guy coming off surgery at that age. I'm just not. I just can't imagine there's a team willing to do that. I know there's people listing him as the top free agent on the market. I don't see it. I just don't see it. Not at this age, not coming off surgery.
Usually a top free agent on the market doesn't have injury questions at his particular age, like Trey Hendrickson does. And that is the concern for any general manager going into a scenario like that. The only way you could sell it is if it's to ownership, I think, of a team that's contending, is that it's a 1-year exposure.
Correct.
And if it doesn't
1
work
year,
out,
15 mil, 18 mil with incentives built in for snaps played.
And that could, by the way, also, I don't know if it'll be that low, but it could be that the Bengals go into another situation where they give them, this is what we're willing to pay you for 1 year to go out and prove that you are healthy again and that you've got another 2 to 3 to 4 years in you. That could work out for the Bengals as well. I wouldn't throw out that possibility.
No,
possibility.
I don't discount that either. But first, you're going to let him try. He's going to try the market for sure. I mean, that's the thing. And again, maybe there is a team willing to pay his whatever he feels his market value is. I just don't think his market value is all that high at this point.
That's always crazy season when the Super Bowl rolls around. And one of those crazy stories that comes up and will come up as long as he's on the Cincinnati Bengals is, will there be trade offers and requests for Joe Burrow? Of course there'll be calls. Sure. Are you interested in trading Joe Burrow? No thanks. Click.
Yeah.
That will be the response from the Bengals.
Here's what I'll take for Joe Burrow, said Duke Tobin. I'll take your 2026 draft and your first round picks in 27, 28, 29, and 30. Sure, I'll trade Joe Burrow if you want to give me that haul.
Let me go back. When was it? The Mike Ditka, New Orleans Saints.
Yes.
What he had offered.
The Achilles Smith draft.
The Achilles Smith draft. Yes. Would that get it done? No.
Man, I don't. I guess I would say this.
I'd say no, but go ahead.
If you're not willing to give that up for the third pick in the draft, which Achilles Smith was, I'm not giving that up for Joe Burrow, a proven commodity.
Correct. But we just have to get.
I'm not giving Joe Burrow up for that. Yeah.
No, I understand. We just have to get through the crazy season.
Yes.
When I hear stories like expect to see Joe Burrow's name come up a lot this offseason, in what context? In what world would the Bengals rationally trade away in the prime of his career? You just signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to give your franchise quarterback two weapons. It's been well documented. They've spent over $500 million on three players. You're not going to trade away the most important piece to two of them.
I think it's more likely that Joe Burrow has his contract restructured this offseason than get traded. And I don't think it's very likely he gets his contract restructured either.
So let's go down that path, Skinny. To what end? Just to loosen up free agent money so the Bengals can be more aggressive rebuilding their defense.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I did that the exercise The Athletic does where you can play Bengals GM and fill out your roster. I did that last week, and there's a story up on local12.com. You can look at how I structured the team and signed the free agents I did. You can certainly feel free to disagree with anything I did, but it's up there. But there's also a scenario in there. They let you do one where you do restructure Burrow's contract. I'm going to do that exercise this week, and I'm really interested to see how much money I can free up. I wasn't able to do all the things I wanted to do in free agency. I came close. I would have liked to sign. I ended up signing Kobe Bryant as a safety. I would have probably liked to sign a more dynamic safety than Kobe Bryant. I signed Eric Wilson as a third linebacker when I maybe wanted to sign a more starting caliber. I didn't really sign an edge rusher of high quality. I did sign John Franklin Myers. My first priority was getting a defensive tackle, and I spent $17 million on him. But I would have liked to have had more money to play with. I'm really I've not even touched the drop down menu on it. I'm just super interested to see what a restructure would look like, a possibility of what it could free up financially for the Bengals.
Back end to the front end, I think that's the priority. You have to fix the safety room. That is, to me, priority number one.
I think I think you saw the two teams in the Super Bowl. Where was one of their strengths? Up the middle defensively, especially up front. Byron Murphy was dynamic, had 2 sacks in that game, had 7 during the season, which for a tackle is a pretty good season. The Patriots signed Milton Williams, and while he wasn't overly dynamic, he was still an important part of that defensive overhaul for them. So to me, as much as you're in my scenario, I let Trey Hendrickson just go. And as much as you're banking on Myles Murphy continuing a forward trend, hoping Shamar Stewart becomes why you drafted him as a first rounder, you still needed more help at edge. And I ended up getting Ibakite, the Falcons defensive end, who didn't have a great season, but I was kind of running out of money because I really made it a priority to sign a tackle. If you go back to that 2021 Super Bowl team, the rotational piece of Larry Ogunjobi and B.J. Hill I thought was really important to that defense. I mean, you already were luckily you had your 2 safeties in place in Jesse Bates and Von Bell. But those 2 guys with Trey Hendrickson and the addition of him, I thought really changed that defense completely in 2021.
Talanoa Hufanga of the Seattle Seahawks. He's a name, and James Rapine of all Bengals, of BengalsTalk.com and SI.com brought that name up. That intrigues me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he was out of my price range, unfortunately, but he was certainly somebody that was on my radar. Like I said, if I could have freed up some more money, he would be on my radar.
I mean, are we looking at Trey Hendrickson money for him over a long period, over multiple years?
I don't think that kind of money, but it'll be. I mean, we saw the defensive end market explode last year, so honestly, I'm not sure where I could predict where it goes. I would have never guessed it went to where it went to last year. The Browns really screwed the pooch when they did that. They screwed everybody over. Yeah, they got the Defensive Player of the Year buttoned up in Myles Garrett, but what did it get them? It got them a 5-win season, a 6-win season. They really, I think they overspent, even though he's a great player, and it set the market, and the market went haywire after that.
What about trading for a guy like Max Crosby? You hear that out there in conversations and online, on social media, Max Crosby.
It intrigues me, but I go back to I got to have at least one defensive tackle who can pressure the passer. Maybe I get it through the draft. That'd be great. That's a depth piece. I'm not counting on that. I need a proven guy who can get to the passer. That's going to cost me money. We know they need at least one starting caliber safety, if not a third rotational piece to add to the mix. They need a slot corner. Some of this you can do through the draft, but it's going to cost you some money. So if you do trade for Max Crosby and you have to take on the salary cap hit, how much of that eats up your available cap space that you need to do to overhaul the defense as it is? Intriguing player for sure. I just go back to the whole cost part of it. Is it just too much when you have so many other things you have to? I wish the only piece they needed to add to this defense was an edge rusher to put them over the top. But I think you agree, Mike, they need so much more than that on that side of the football.
So if they don't get Caleb Downs, Peter Woods out of Clemson.
Yep. I did 2 mock drafts last week. Unfortunately, Mike, the simulator I used, David Bailey, Reuben Bain, and Caleb Downs were all off the board. So I did 2 of them because I just want to see which way they went. And in the first mock I did, I used what simulator did I use? I used the Pro Football Network Draft Simulator. Peter Woods was my pick for the reasons we talked about it. He can play nose. He can play. He can play in the gap. I just think, but I can't fully count on that. I got to have somebody proven. I want him to be my rotational developmental piece who, if he pans out like I expect the first round pick to pan out, well, so much the better. Now I got multiple sides.
See, the problem I think the Bengals fall into, and it's one of the reasons I think a lot of people are worried about whether or not the Bengals can get it done, is whether or not anybody on the roster can step forward and be a pressure piece up the middle on the defensive line. Maybe Chris Jenkins. I think the Bengals are putting a lot of chips in the Chris Jenkins Jr. Basket. He comes back from injury, and he has a year this year, kind of like Miles Murphy had for the final 7 or 8 games of this past season.
Yeah, in the scenario I did in The Athletic, I actually cut both TJ Slate and BJ Hill to free up some money, and I had Chris Jenkins listed as my third tackle. My third interior defensive lineman, and I mentioned I signed John Franklin Myers, and then actually I believe I plugged a draft pick, and I can't remember who I took in that simulation. I took a kid out of I took Christian Miller out of Georgia to be my nose tackle. I figure I can plug and play a nose tackle type guy in there. But yeah, I think the more the merrier in there. I'm not going to put my eggs in Chris Jenkins' basket. I hope you're right, and we saw that from Miles. You're right, 3rd year for Miles, and it took probably half the year of the 3rd year to get going. Once he did, though, I mean, I feel like I don't think he's a dynamic piece, but he's certainly a solid piece.
A reliable piece.
Yeah, reliable piece. Good word. With a chance to even be more than that. I just don't know where Chris Jenkins does at the moment. He just hasn't done anything in 2 years, to be honest with you.
Kalavon Chason, the defensive end for the New England Patriots. Jalen Hawkins, a safety for the Patriots as well. They are 2 names. They played in the Super Bowl. Are they 2 names that the Bengals should prioritize anyway?
Yeah, as I mentioned, yes. Again, it comes down to the financials of it, though, and that's where, again, when I started running out of money, I very quickly had to pivot and say I got to get a starting caliber safety, and Kobe Bryant was in my price range. So something that, Hawkins is in the mix. Kyle Duggar may be in the mix, but again, a couple of those guys may just be a tad bit too expensive. I just need a good, reliable starter at safety. Bengals don't value the position. I don't need an impact.
I need a playmaker.
I need a
playmaker.
All right, give me reliable, because what you have right back there now is the thing is you do have a potential playmaker in Jordan Battle. The highs of Jordan Battle, I think you'll agree with Mike, are really high.
In the box, he's a playmaker, but I need somebody all around the field. I hate bringing up this name, but since we have talked about Caleb Downs a lot and a lot of other people, is Ed Reed. I need an Ed Reed who's flying literally all over. There is a great clip, and it was a great clip last week before the Super Bowl, of, I forget who the coach was, it might have been Belichick actually, who pointed out that Peyton Manning, he was reading Peyton Manning, Ed Reed was, and he read the middle of the field. He spun around and played a guy on the weak side and picked off the pass. And Peyton Manning later said, either after the game or later that season, when they played him again, I never saw him. I never thought anybody where he started pre-snap would wind up in the spot he did to make that interception. That is the kind of player that we don't we've talked about it a little bit with Jesse Bates, but you want a player like that who can change the game with. Yeah.
Well, sure you do, but there's none of those guys in free agency that Ed Reed. I mean, maybe there's a guy in the draft like Caleb Downs, but you got to have Caleb Downs fall to you. So to me, again, just get me reliable at the moment. If you draft a Caleb Downs because he fell to you and he becomes Ed Reed, hallelujah. I mean, Ed Reed's in Canton for a reason. There's no Ed Reeds out in the marketplace. There's no Ed Reeds in the marketplace.
I understand. Are there Kyle Hamiltons out there? Is that Caleb Downs?
No, I don't think. I think it's Caleb Downs can be that guy. Yes, absolutely. But again, you got to get lucky. As I mentioned in this simulator, I looked at 10 first-round mock drafts last week for a story I did just to kind of sample them. And Caleb Downs, I think Bailey and Bain were off the board in 9 of the 10. Downs was on the board in 4 of the 10, and I think I took Downs, or Downs was the selection on 4 of those because he fell to the Bengals in those. So 4 out of the 10 first-round mock drafts took Caleb Downs. So it's conceivably falls there. The league doesn't seem to value that position, especially when it comes to draft. Like, Kyle Hamilton was a dude, and for whatever reason, Kyle Hamilton fell to late in the first round because he's a safety. And I think that I hope the Bengals do. I hope when it comes to 10, if he's on the board, and I'm just going to assume for argument's sake Bailey and Bain are off the board, that they don't try to get too smart for their own good. They don't look and go, well, he's only 6 feet, 190 pounds. He doesn't run like a jet. I don't care. All I watch him do on Saturdays is make plays for a team against high-level competition. He's the best player on the field almost every game he's on the field. He's just a football player. That's what Kyle Hamilton is. You saw that last night with Nick Emenwari. You saw that with, actually, he's more of a cornerback, but Devin Weatherspoon, how much they used him in blitz situations last night and how much he affected the game. Just give me a football player.
Don't give me Reek Woolen. He got burned again.
No, don't give me. I don't need that cat.
I texted you during the game.
I saw
with regard to that.
Yes,
and you didn't reply, so
I'm sorry.
Didn't know if you were otherwise occupied or
it
not.
It might have been a time when I was half in the bag too, Mike.
I was going to let you say that. I wasn't going to go there, but all right. Trey Brown, assistant general manager of the Cincinnati Bengals. His name has come up before for other jobs around the National Football League. And now Alec Lewis of The Athletic has a report out there that he could be one of 12 potential candidates to replace the vacancy created when Minnesota fired GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah last month after a very disappointing season. I don't know if it's fair to say, but Adolfo-Mensah, I think, got fired for Sam Darnold.
Oh, I think he did too. There was a great story in The Athletic that kind of took you behind the curtains of some of that stuff. This is a guy who's a former Wall Street broker who kind of got into football through the analytics side of things from the Browns organization of all places, and he did kind of roll the dice on the Sam Darnold move, and it sounded like the coaching staff really didn't trust him when it came to personnel decisions any longer. And then it really sounded like when the owners of the Vikings watched Sam Darnold win the NFC Championship game, decided the next day, yeah, he screwed this up. See you later. So, that's what created that opening. Sounded like everybody seemed like he was a very nice guy. He just sounded like the dude was in over his head. The only thing for Trey Brown, and I know he's highly regarded, at least that's what we hear, right? I don't know him well. I don't think you know him well. It feels like his name comes up every offseason in these GM searches, and I hate to say this because I hope I'm wrong, because I hope he finally gets a chance somewhere. But he always feels like a Rooney Rule guy to interview. I've always wondered, was that Eric Bieniemy, or was Eric Bieniemy just horrible in interviews that he never got a job despite being a finalist for a coaching spot in numerous different places? And it could be that. It could be he's just not a very good interviewer. But it feels like Trey Brown's name comes up every offseason, and it just never comes to fruition for him. And again, maybe there's more qualified people. Maybe he doesn't interview well. Maybe it's just not his time. But it just feels like it's every offseason his name pops up and then nothing comes of it. And then I don't really know what he does with the Bengals because we don't really know what the organizational structure is all about, right?
Well, and the argument could be, well, the Bengals don't have a particularly big front office to
Right.
begin with. You lose somebody like Trey Brown, who has a fairly significant voice when talking to Mike Brown and
Yep.
Duke Tobin. But the way I look at that is they don't listen to a lot of people to begin with. And I think Duke, and Mike Potts and Stephen Radisevich, yes, thank you, are the two main voices to Duke Tobin, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's time for a Trey Brown to get an opportunity somewhere in a different type of organization, a different type of structure, and maybe that would be good for him. Look, I remember Trey Brown from his days with the Patriots. He was exposed to a great functioning organization. Now, it was when one person is really in charge of everything. That was Belichick. He was all football decisions went through Belichick, and a little. There were Nick Caserio also had a voice, but Bill Belichick was the final voice. That's not the way it runs here in Cincinnati. Ownership, Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor, and his coaching staff. So maybe it's time for Trey Brown to get outside, spread his wings a little bit. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I hope he does get the opportunity, but it seems like this comes up every year and nothing ever comes of it.
Also, if the Bengals were to lose Trey Brown, it's interesting to note that the Bengals would get compensatory draft picks, 2 third-rounders in 26 and 27. So, I mean, if the Bengals were to lose him and another team were to hire him away, that is a benefit that the Bengals could realize almost starting immediately. Anything else on your schedule?
No, as I say, other than, when you're trying to overhaul a roster, you're not going to be able to do it all in free agency. So, yeah, getting another draft pick, and especially, one before day 3, that would be helpful for sure.
Maybe that's why, by the way, circling back to one of our earlier discussions about Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals need to find a way to get more and more picks so that they can maneuver the draft like a 21st century NFL team does. And that's one of the frustrations that a lot of Bengal fans have. They go into the draft, they're like, okay, we picked 10th. Who's the best player at 10?
Right.
Instead of thinking, who's the player we want? And do we have to gamble that he'll fall to us, or do we move up and get that player?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I know they've used the excuses of, we couldn't find a trading partner and they're not as easy to make as you think. I sure seem to see every NFL draft day on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, trades popping up all over the board, right? You rarely see the Bengals do it. They've done it a little bit. I mean, they traded up for Ryan Finley a few years ago. Thank God they did that. But they rarely do it.
Yeah. So, that's just the way I think the Bengals need to approach this. They have to think outside the box. If we are to sit here, hold on one moment.
Yeah, sure.
If we are to sit here and think, well, the Bengals are going to continue to do things the way they have always done them, and then the result will be different. We know what the definition of insanity is. What is your point?
Yeah, I mean, look at two of arguably the best GMs, if not the 2 best GMs in football. Howie Roseman of the Eagles and John Schneider of Seattle. How have they done the last couple of years?
Yeah, and it's demonstrated success over an extended period of time. Right, John Schneider, by the way, was also the general manager when they won their first Super Bowl, went back-to-back, should have won went to the Super Bowl back-to-back years, should have won back-to-back Super Bowls. We know why they didn't, but he has seen now 2 different iterations of a very successful football model.
You're right. I mean, again, not everybody can be a John Schneider or a Howie Roseman, but those guys are obviously out there. And to your point, to have built this in 2 different ways, to say to a very highly successful and popular head coach, Pete Carroll, your time has come and gone, see you. To your face your franchise and the quarterback, Russell Wilson, we're trading you. To, I think everybody knew JSN was going to blossom, maybe not to the degree he blossomed this year into this mega superstar wide receiver who's in that upper tier category with the Jamar Chases of the world. But he had his T. Higgins alongside his Jamar Chase there in DK Metcalf. And what did he choose to do? yeah, I'm going to see you later. I'm going to get some draft capital for you. And again, I don't think these things happen by mistake. And unfortunately, here the status quo is the status quo, and that's why. Listen, can they change? Can they do all the things they need to do this offseason? Yes, they can.
Yeah.
Will they do it? Will they make the proper moves?